Recently, many analog horror videos have been taken off in YouTube. Many new VHS series all telling unique stories have flourished ever since FNAF VHS really took things into high gear. If you're out of the loop on what analog horror is, let me clue you in. Analog horror is a type of horror that uses analog media, for example VHS tapes, to visually communicate a theme and narrative all while being scary, hence the name. In many ways they are similar to alternate reality games. Multimedia projects that use codes, ciphers, and other hidden messages to tell narratives that don't exist in the real world. Now, ARGs have been around far longer than you may realize, predating even the earliest video sharing websites. Their history is nearly congruent with the internet as a whole, changing and adapting with the times. But to truly comprehend the vast timeline of ARGs, we need to go back to the late 1980s. The World Wide Web still hasn't been released yet. The internet is much more niche, and as a result, the few who had internet during this period are often geeks or literal developers. This brings us to the legend of Ongsat, New Jersey, a ghost town that had all its residents vanish under mysterious circumstances. In the late 80s, a story featuring the town was published in a magazine by anarchist Peter Wilson, supposedly anyway. It featured many conspiracies explaining its vanishing, mainly revolving around experiments conducted in the town by the mysterious Dobbs twins. As the story goes, the Moorish preacher and his followers meet with the scientists and start collaborating with each other. Many physical and metaphysical events ensue. A flyer being spread around the same time describes the group as thriving in the area and doing incredible experiments, eventually culminating in the creation of the universe-hopping vehicle called the Egg. After a nuclear incident occurs near the town, parts of it start getting transported piece by piece to a parallel world where there isn't any nuclear accident. Eventually it was all cleared and everyone parted ways, but the vortex opened by the Egg still remains. A few years later, an extremely rare book was published that detailed the events that occurred in Ongsat called. The book features many citations from books and publications that seemingly don't exist, perhaps deliberately purged from reality to avoid anyone finding out. It was originally written as a half-inside joke and half-thought experiment, a thought on what an outlandish story would do to the psyche on the very niche internet. Although the story started small, it slowly became a much bigger deal. Appearances in magazines, radio show interviews, and even fake documents. These extra pieces of media that pieced together the story left a massive impact on the audience. And because of that, many people were left dumbfounded by it all. It was the first of its kind anywhere online, and people, despite being used to conspiracy theories, had never seen one develop on the internet before. Logically, many people tried to decipher its meaning. They went to Ongsat. They tried to find the hidden vortex. It was truly the first real internet event, one of the earliest instances of internet users working together. This of course led to many detractors as well. These people got really mad about the story being not real, which may seem delusional today, but keep in mind this was before everything. The creator, which I should mention by now was actually called Joseph Masseny, toyed around with the lore and occasionally made in-character interviews on his website. The interviews were really strange and didn't really confirm or deny its existence. And finally, in 1999, he published an ebook on the lore of it all. He appeared on a radio show in character as an Ongsat survivor, in a broadcast that reached millions of people. 2 years later, the game was finally over. But even after that, people still believed the story had at least some effects on their psyche. Some people believed it actually existed, others remembered seeing it on the news, and some even remembered feeling fatigued over the story. Even after so many years since its creation, it still managed to hold on to the internet's consciousness. It was truly something to behold, and its legacy persists to this day. When this event happened, the internet was still small, but it would all change in 1991, when the World Wide Web finally came out. In 1993, America Online starts spreading free hours of internet access in mailboxes. They had been doing this for a while now, but with this new system, they are going one step further by allowing users access to Usenet. Usenet had been around for many years by this point, and there had been many users who just hung out in newsgroups. Eternal September was when AOL made hundreds of thousands of people flood into Usenet newsgroups. For the first time, people wanted to gatekeep their interest on the web. The old wise long-time users had become dwindling. There was no way of ending it. It was just there now. And it would stay that way for far longer than anyone could have ever imagined. The year is now 1994. By this point, the fire of Eternal September had largely died down. Unrelated to this, a new Pink Floyd album had just come out called The Division Bell. As a result, the news group alt.music.pink Floyd had a spike in users, eager to see others' opinions on the album. But on June 11th, they would bear witness to something strange. My friends, you have heard the message Pink Floyd has delivered, but have you listened? Perhaps I can be your guide, but I will not solve the enigma for you. All of you must open your minds and communicate with each other, as this is the only way the answers can be revealed. I may help you, but only if obstacles arise. Listen, read, think, communicate. If I don't promise you the answers, would you go? Publius. Now the promotion for the album was nothing short of grand, with cafes and blimps moving across the UK. But this didn't really seem like a promotion. It was weird and disjointed. The poster was anonymous and the only identifier given was the sign-off. In a later message, the Publius figure continued, "As some of you have suspected, the Division Bell is not like its predecessors. Although all great music is subject to multiple interpretations, in this case there is a central purpose and a design solution. For the ingenious person or group of persons who recognizes this, and where this information points to, a unique prize has been secreted. How and where? The Division Bell. Listen again. Look again. As your thoughts will steer you, leading the blind while I stared out the steel in your eyes. Lyrics, artwork, and music will take you there." People were confused. They were trying to find any meaning in the album, reading every lyric, listening to every note, and looking at every single variant of the cover, which there were a lot of, but they were left empty-handed. None of the covers had the slightest hint of anything relating to solving the riddle. Eventually, people found out that the phrase Publius Enigma had already been there on an earlier Pink Floyd album, the mini-disc release of A Momentary Lapse of Reason. The cover featured the text Publius and Enigma, seemingly hidden in plain sight. The anonymous figure would post once more, calling people to go to East Rutherford Arena in New Jersey, claiming that something would happen on the concert stage at a certain time period. People didn't know what to think. While some thought it was all marketing BS, others kept it in good faith, and soon, they would find out if this would actually happen or not. This was huge. The words Publius and Enigma were clearly visible on the concert stage. This was real. The puzzle was starting to get slowly pieced together. It was now up to hundreds of people to solve it, or at least try to solve it. The Publius figure would continue giving clues and congratulating people on slowly figuring them all out, until going silent on August 1995, and the mystery finally being... Well, I actually lied there. There was no dramatic conclusion to this whole ARG. It was never solved. In an interview 8 years later, Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour confirmed that the entire ordeal was just another silly marketing gimmick on top of all the other silly marketing gimmicks. The Publius Enigma marketing gimmick absolutely did work, making fans buy tickets and the album, and it showed that the internet was far more profitable than what was previously expected. There is a great significance in the page numbers. While some of you might think this statement vague, trust me, it is not. While I have been gone for a while, trust that I will return shortly with the second clue. You are all closer than you think. Publius. 1996 was an especially important year for the internet. Websites like GeoCities allowed common folk just starting out to easily make websites. The first forums started to operate on this year, and it was generally a time of great technological achievement. It was during this time that many ARGs would flourish. While some ARGs can be usually chalked up to promotions for video games, others were a lot more artsy. NetArt was important in facilitating many personal and non-commercial ARGs. Websites could be filled with pages and pages forming a narrative of sorts. It was still the Wild West for web design, so anything could pass for a story. Similarly to how the very first ARG began, Most of these websites were spread around in many niche corners of the web. These websites would prove a fascinating footnote in internet history. During this time, it finally became more well-known in mainstream media. It was featured in news publications and TV shows. Now we are going to skip a few years to 1999. 1999 would have a very important release, the Blair Witch Project. The promotion for the film was innovative, opting to be promoted entirely via word of mouth and flyers appearing in certain places. The film's website was also spread around via word of mouth and featured many pieces of lore that helped develop the idea that the film was actually recovered footage from the missing student protagonists. They went out of their way to make this believable, for good reason. Their budget wasn't very high. It was an indie release, and as a result its marketing was far more ahead of the curve. And it worked, convincing many people that the film was actually real and making them go see it. The website itself got hundreds of millions of hits, and this promotion is most likely one of the main contributors to it making 1,000 times its budget. But this is 1999. The world is changing, but for a different reason. The internet is more profitable than ever before. It's a commercial entity that people want to exploit, the dot-com bubble expanding to cover hundreds and hundreds of websites about any topic. But there is also a great melancholy in this year. This is the end of the millennium. An entire 1,000 years of human achievement now climaxing in some numbers being lined up. A lot of people say that this will be a horrible event that will end the world. Computers won't be able to process the millennium and think it's 1900. But we'll just have to wait and see if it really happens. The year is now 2001. Y2K didn't happen, Usenet boards are losing their relevance, and the dot-com bubble has burst, leaving many websites without financial backing to grossly oversimplify a longer story that's for another day. Many new websites created by dusty internet dwellers have taken their corporate place. It was during this time that the quote-unquote fad of the internet had long faded away, and it was generally accepted to be something that millions of people were just using in everyday conversation. And it was during this time that a movie promotion would occur that was unfathomably big. In order to promote Steven Spielberg's new film AI, the marketing team had a fascinating idea of creating an online cat and mouse game of code breakers. The game started out simple. It was focusing on the character Evan Chan and his murder in 2142 and all the ensuing legal issues that happened afterwards. The general promotion of the movie had many clues that led to one of the 40 websites created for the game. A graffiti in a major city had a link, the trailer had a phone number that led to one of the major characters' actual phone numbers, and the community behind all of this was huge. There were groups all across the web deciphering numbers, finding clues, and generally trying to make sense of the whole murder plot and what transpired afterwards. The Cloudmakers were one of these such groups, and they were one of the key investigators during the ARG. They, along with others, discovered that Chan's murder was conducted by an underground robot revolutionary movement. Eventually, one of these robots began to hack each of the websites, and people tried to find a way to defeat this evil entity. Finally, they decoded its weakness through World War II era ciphers, and the hack was stopped by a nightmare database. This campaign was highly publicized. It was an incredible marketing gimmick that was successful in engaging an audience of thousands trying to decode its meaning. It was also successful in promoting the movie, and it did really well in the box office. This promotion proved that the internet could come together to decode a large-scale narrative. In a way, despite coming after all the others I mentioned before, it was the first big ARG. Funny how that works out considering the first historical ARG ended around the same time. In 2004, Bungie was on its way to promote the upcoming release of the highly anticipated Halo 2, and to promote it they put up a website called ilovebees. This was decided on by executives as a way of interacting with the internet at large. It first began by people decoding a message hidden subliminally in Halo 2's trailer. The site's layout resembles that of any other amateur blog at the time, this one belonging to a beekeeper named Dana. The basic page was however blocked off by a giant black rectangle and a countdown to Wide Awake and Physical. The countdown ended July 27th, with the bottom text now reading, "Network rotting will erode." On August 10th, the website updated with 200 GPS coordinates to various points all across the United States. A week later, these coordinates were changed for seemingly no reason, but this included an extra detail of approaching these coordinates at certain times to get certain messages. As such, people began to go to each one of these places at the times described. The actual process is much more complicated, but to sum it up, what happened was you would get an AI voice ask you simple questions relating to a code word, and when answered, you would need to take a picture and send it to the website. The picture would be you standing next to the payphones. If you did all these processes correctly, the AI would play a small piece of audio. There were 777 payphones in total. When these calls were pieced together, they would form a Halo audio drama with a story involving a boy named Jersey who goes on a bunch of shenanigans trying to keep a Halo artifact from activating, and in the process, activating a rogue AI that travels back to the past. Unfortunately, that AI decided to hack the website of a random beekeeper. This would be the end of the story, with the final message inviting players to 4 specific places to train for combat. These combat training locations were kiosks with demos of Halo 2. A year later, the video sharing website YouTube would be founded. Now this is where the story ends. If I covered YouTube ARGs in this video, it would be far longer and the title would not make much sense. I hope these pieces of early alternate reality games can make you appreciate the internet in these times of trouble. Despite being nearly as old as the World Wide Web, ARGs have persisted longer than any other internet fad. Nowadays, you'll see millions of people watching analog horror content. It's funny to think that these currently trending pieces of media fit into a niche that started out when analog media was the dominant way of recording. I guess in a way it all goes full circle. Like it or not, these old pieces of marketing jargon and bored storytellers paved the way for online narratives we still see to this day. In a way, they were the first content creators, always keeping people on edge for what would come afterwards. Not all people can be a William Shakespeare, but sometimes all you need to do is some edgy visuals and a hidden story to go along with it. Storytelling is a medium, and no matter how we write it or where we write it, it's still interesting. Thanks for watching this video, and I swear the next video is gonna be a what was on Sonic Extreme.